I'm Dennis Anderson along with Julie Zenner, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North.
We've invited the 4 candidates running for 2 at-large Duluth City Council seats to the studio for a forum tonight.
In fact, the candidates are here to talk about fixing city streets, water rates, and more campaign issues.
And we'll have the week's business headlines and the latest veterans profile from our Voices of Vietnam series.
So it's all coming up right now on Almanac North. Hello once again and welcome to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. And Julie, we woke up to an October surprise this morning. All the snow.
Lots of snow, lots of wet, white snow to deal with this morning. Hopefully everybody got to where they needed to get to safely.
I hope so. Well, a little snow can't get us down, so might as well get to the candidates.
All right. Thank you, Dennis, and welcome everyone. This week we have another forum with candidates running for Duluth City Council. 4 people are vying for 2 at-large City Council seats in Duluth. The top 2 vote getters in the November 7th election will win the right to represent Duluthians for the next 4 years. We will introduce the candidates in alphabetical order. Zach Filipovich is an incumbent who was first elected to the council in 2013. Janet Kennedy is one of the challengers in the at-large City Council election. Barb Russ is an incumbent city councilor running for her 2nd term. And Rich Updegrove is a challenger in the at-large City Council race. And thanks to all of you for being here. We really appreciate you coming in on this snowy evening.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll kind of start, since we introduced you in alphabetical order, we'll start in the reverse. Rich Updegrove, why don't you tell our viewers what you would like them to know about you and why you're running for City Council?
Well, I'm a high school teacher at East, where I teach economics for college credit through UMD, and then an American government and a civil and criminal law class through Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College. And I'm a father of a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, Leaf and Aurora, and we're raising them in the house that my wife, Jen McEwen, grew up in, that her great-grandparents built 100 years ago. And so we're the 4th generation raising children in that home. And prior to that life that I now have, I grew up in a trailer park on free and reduced lunch, and I've kind of worked as a youth advocate here in Duluth, whether it's with youth employment services or a runaway and homeless youth program. So issues of youth as an advocate are an important thing for me on the City Council, and wanting to make sure that we have someone on the council who's looking after youth from infants all the way through college students is something I'm really concerned about.
Barbara, same question to you.
Yes. In the last 4 years, I've learned a lot about Duluth. When I first ran for election, I thought our streets were our biggest problem. They still are a problem. We're going to try and solve that in the next 4 years with the mayor's plan, and I support that plan. I think it's a good way to raise some money, and it's not too much of a burden for most people. Of course, nobody wants to have anything to be increased. One thing that's become very important to me is housing, a lack of housing. We need more affordable housing. There are too many families in Duluth who do not have adequate housing for their families. So I believe it's very possible in the next 4 years that we can increase affordable housing every year, 400 units. And in addition, we also need to start looking at more senior housing. I talk to people who are like my age and want to get rid of the big house. The kids are gone, and they would like to buy down and get something a little bit smaller. So we need to look at that as well for additional housing in Duluth.
Janet Kennedy.
Thank you. I'm Janet Kennedy, and I'm running for City Council at large because I do believe a community can survive and prosper as a whole when we're all walking on even ground. I grew up as a lifelong resident. We came here in the 60s. My dad was in the Air Force. We lived up in Harborview and had to move out to Western Duluth when they had the flood when we were building the Miller Hill Mall, and the river flooded. And so I grew up out there in 5th grade. As I got older, I realized that I needed to give back, and I wanted to give to people, even as a youngster. And so as I raised my children as a single mom, using community services to make ends meet, I realized that it was my passion to give back. I learned that from my mom and my church and how important that was. And so I started working on the health and all policies. As a parish nurse, I'm building a nonprofit, the Cross Cultural Alliance of Duluth. And then I began working with the Imagine Duluth 2035 Vision Committee and realized that there's a gap. There's a gap as far as looking at our social health and health equity, and looking at that as more of the social, the economic, and the environmental impacts of health. And that we make better decisions when we have a diverse board and a diverse leadership making decisions for our whole city.
Zach Filipovich, why do you want to go back to the council?
Well, there's a couple different reasons. One, thank you, Julie and Denny. I grew up here in Duluth next to Chester Creek, graduated from Duluth Central, go Trojans. That's where my campaign colors come from. I worked my way through college at UMD, and actually now, in addition to being a counselor, I'm an accountant, and I work downtown with several businesses and people, making sure that they understand their financial realities. And Duluth is growing. I think we've made a lot of progress. We've increased our tax base by over $1.1 million in 2016 alone. I think that's a very positive thing. But there are still people still struggling with, when we have 20 to 25% of our population that lives in poverty, and when you think of our largest, fastest growing revenue source being sales tax, that's not a sustainable model for the future of Duluth. And so I want to go back and continue to grow our city in a sustainable way.
Okay. All of you have touched on some of the issues that are facing yourselves and the voters come election day, which is coming up very quickly. Barb, let's start with you. You've already mentioned the need for, you believe, to increase the city sales tax to help with street repair. Let's go around the circle here on that one issue here for a few moments. Why do you think we need to increase the city's sales tax?
Well, we've been trying to do as much as we can just with the money that we do have, but it's not enough. We need to be able to do much more every year in order to get our streets fixed. I mean, everybody must agree that we need to do something about it. And we didn't want to increase the levy anymore because that is really a hardship for people, and it really doesn't even generate enough money anyway to do enough street work each year.
Jenna, where do you stand on this issue?
I like the idea of the tax. It spreads the burden across the thousands of people who come in and work every day here, the millions of visitors that come every year into our great city, and it releases some of the burden on all of us that choose to live here. It won't tax groceries and it won't tax clothing, so it's really a good idea. The one really good thing about it is that the voters get to decide, and that's really important that we as a city see that as a way that we want to move forward. We haven't had sustainable street monies since 2006. We did some bonding and we're still paying that back, and also some of the revenues from the casino has gone away, and so we need to make sure that we as a city, and when we vote, that's what we want to do, to make a difference in our roads. I think it's important. Roads are important, streets are important, and we need to make sure we have good accessibility.
All right. And Zach, your idea, please?
Yes, no, I'm supportive of the mayor's plan. I've been on council for 4 years now, and I keep hearing residents, Duluthians, wanting a bold action plan for streets, and I think this is it. We have $2.8 million for roads right now. $1.1 million of that has to go for when we used to borrow money to pay for roads. This will generate $7 million or there's about, with tourism folks paying into that as well. So I agree that it's a bold plan, and I think Duluth should move on it.
And Rich, your stand, please?
Yeah, so I also support the half-cent sales tax. I like that it goes through the voters first. The voters have to approve it of Duluth, and then it has to go through the state legislature as well. So I like that well-thought-out process through it. And if we were going to come up with funding anywhere similar to a half-cent sales tax, it would be raising the property taxes. And the city of Duluth is about 24% of the property tax. We'd have to raise it 40%, and that would hit renters and everyone across the board, and it would not be sustainable to try to fund our roads in that way.
All right, Janet, At some point in the future, the City Council is going to be addressing the issue of earned sick and safe time. It's a controversial topic. Some businesses in the community have expressed concern about being required to pay this to their employees. What do you think about it? And is it needed, and if so, why?
It is needed. You know, as a single mom, I had to make many times make a decision to go to work or send my kids to school when they were sick. And I've also been a director, so I've had employees, and I understand that, you know, employees feel valued, and you have increased productivity when you actually allow people to care for their family members. One of the things I want to make sure is that we're considering our small businesses. Duluth is made up of a lot of small businesses, and currently I'm doing a walk across the city. It started in Brighton Beach. Right now we're out in West Duluth, and all the way through the city, talking to people on the streets and going into businesses. And we are a city that have a lot of entrepreneurs and small businesses that drive our economic base, and so we need to make sure we take care of those businesses.
Zach, do you think that this proposal would do that, take care of businesses and take care of residents?
You know, I think we can find a balance. You know, Duluth has done it in the past with difficult issues. I think we can do it again. That's why I'm so proud of the task force that I created and appointed last year as council president. We had business leaders on it. We had community leaders on it. Diverse voices coming together, and they actually came in and voted, and they're going to be presenting the recommendations to the council. The recommendations are online if folks want to take a look at that. I've personally met with a lot of business folks. Some are against, that's to be certain, but we really do need to drill down and get into the details of what this is going to look like, and I think that's going to be very important once we do.
Rich, what are your thoughts on the earned sick and safe time?
Well, it's been an interesting week for that. As Zach mentioned, the information of the task force is available online, yet at the same time, the City Council decided to delay the reading of the different ordinances to the task force. And a lot of people who have worked really hard, whether it's the task force members themselves who are volunteering their own time, or the people who came to share their tragic stories of what it was like to not have the ability to stay home with their children. I feel like the City Council needs to stand up more for working people, for people who are struggling. As someone who has seen it from my role as a teacher and knowing that my older students are staying home with their younger siblings so that their parents can go to work, and haven't experienced that myself, being a child having to stay home with no one with me when my parents couldn't care for me, it's deeply important to me. And I think that we need independent voices on the City Council who are going to stand up for what they say that they're going to do, and that's an important thing that we need as City Councilors.
Janet, do you think it's a good idea to require businesses to pay earned sick and safe time as a benefit to their employees?
I'm very supportive of that. All of my adult life, I worked for government. And so we always had those kind of benefits. I was an attorney at St. Louis County for 35 years. We had very good benefits. We had sick leave, we had vacation time, we had what we called personal time. And so frankly, it came as a surprise to me after I left the county. And of course my children are all adults now and have children of their own. But I was very surprised to find out that almost half of the working people in Duluth do not have any of those kinds of benefits. And it's very difficult for families. And myself, people my age are often also caring for adult parents. And so we need to have that kind of time off.
And I do have to apologize. It's Barb.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Janet, Barb. My mistake, and I apologize for that.
All right, Zach, let's move on to affordable housing. The Duluth housing stock. How does it look to you? Should anything be done about it?
Well, you know, this is Barb's issue, but I absolutely agree with her. We do need more affordable housing units. I have a lot of friends who graduated college and Duluth Central High School that have moved away, and they want to move back. They can find a job here in a lot of cases, but they cannot find a good affordable place to live. A lot of that stems from our aged housing stock. And actually, I just had a meeting at City Hall today to hopefully address some of that. So we have an old housing stock, we don't have enough housing in general, and we certainly do not have enough affordable housing. There are a lot of things that we can do, partnering with the county, and other nonprofits like One Roof Housing, like we have done over the past 4 years to increase our housing stock. Garfield Square Apartments was just announced last week with the mayor and some other councilors. So there are positive things happening. It's a slow and steady process, but we are making progress.
Rich, your views, please. Are we making progress?
I think we're making progress, and the announcement this week was really nice to see that we are moving forward in that direction. And One Roof is a really creative way of sort of going about how do you provide an actual single-family home to people and make that affordable. And you can see projects out in Lakeside that are really moving forward in a positive way. For me, it's a bigger issue than just housing. I mean, we think of it as the place where you live, and it's so much bigger than providing just a place where you live. Our affordable housing crisis is leading to a homelessness crisis as well. So in Duluth Public Schools, we have an increase at East, where I teach. We have an increase in homeless students who are attending school. And if we aren't addressing affordable housing, we are putting so much strain on our community, and it creates a public safety issue as well. So I think when we're thinking about affordable housing, we need to think about how earned sick and safe time is part of that. How a homeless person's Bill of Rights is part of that, how lifting up those who are struggling most lifts all of us up. And that's something I would like to do as a counselor.
Barb, you keep shaking your head
Yes,
in the
yes,
affirmative.
yes.
Apparently this
Yes.
is a big issue for yourself.
Absolutely, and we also need more single-family homes as well. And so I hope that we can partner with our other housing organizations in the city to get more of that done as well. So we need all types of housing, and we do have good developers who want to work with us, and it's just a matter of just getting going and getting it done.
Janet, would you address this, please?
Yes, thank you. You know, I just want to say that all Duluthians must do well for Duluth to sustain and progress. And we really do make better decisions when we have everyone at the table, and that includes having diversity on the city council. And I say that because I've been doing a lot of work within the Imagine Duluth 2035, and as a planning commissioner, you know, we've been working on, you know, transportation, economic development, and housing. And one of the things that I'm very proud of in working with a group of people is that we were able to get the health and fairness language into the principles. And I think that's going to make a big difference. And that's why policies matter. And that's why when we have everyone at the table, we're able to make policies. And that will be able to affect housing and making sure we have housing for everyone.
Thank you.
Zach, we're getting close to running out of time. About 30 seconds for everybody on this next topic. So maybe just pick one thing that you would like to see happen that could maybe make the city of Duluth more friendly to business and jobs.
Well, we were talking about earned and safe time. I think one of the biggest things businesses need are customers, and we talked about that sales tax piece, and we talked about that economic equity piece. There are a lot of things that I think we can do. Councilor Russ and I, we voted for the red tape task force earlier this year that will perhaps cut down on some of the burdensome or unnecessary regulations that people have to go through.
Rich?
I think the best thing we can do for our economy and for Duluth is to recognize that the reason Duluth exists is because we live on this gorgeous body of water of Lake Superior. And that's what brings small businesses here, that's what brings families here, that's why people stay here, want to retire here. And so when we have opportunities to stand up for our lake, let the Department of Natural Resources know, let the state know that in Duluth, the lake comes first, that we need to defend it at all times, and that's an economic issue, and that's how we stand up for our city.
All right, Barb?
Well, everything has to kind of work together. If we have crappy streets, new businesses don't want to come in. They think, well, they aren't taking care of their city. So that has to happen. I agree with about Lake Superior, and I am going to be working with WLSSD about this continuing problem that we're having with overflow into Lake Superior. I mean, that's something that we can do something about, and we need to work on that.
All right, Janet, last word.
I believe in making sure we have a health equity focus in all policies, and that's how we're going to make a difference in everyone's life.
All right, well, thank you all so much. Good luck as you head into the home stretch. A busy time for you, and appreciate your service to the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank you
for
all
having
very
us.
much.
Thank you.
All fall, we've been bringing you profiles of local Vietnam veterans here on Almanac North. Now, this week we feature a veteran who grew up in the Deep South but moved to northern Minnesota after serving in Vietnam. It's the latest in our series, Voices of Vietnam.
I grew up in Miami, and I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade and enlisted in the U.S. Army at 17. The computer or the Pentagon decided I was to be a medic. Okay. So they sent me to Fort Sam Houston. Mm-hmm. And when I got out of my advanced training as a medic, I was still too young to be sent to Vietnam like all the rest of my class. So I had to go to Germany. So I spent a year in Germany and then Fort Riley, Kansas, and was actually kind of glad to leave Fort Riley when I came down on levy for Vietnam. I arrived in Vietnam, and as soon as I got off the Tiger airline, the last person that went out the door, the stewardess slammed the door shut and the plane was rolling. And there was a pickup truck with a follow me sign on it, and there was about 150 of us with all of our duffel bags and stuff. And we had to jog to keep up because they were actually worried about mortars, enemy mortars. The first real impression that you get though when you get off the airplane or looking just before landing is the number of different smoke, fire pyres, and the smell. It's a real strong sulfur smell, gunpowder smell. You're expendable because you're green. You don't know anything. So we were actually on the edge of the perimeter of Benoit Air Base, and we saw rockets fired from helicopters at the perimeter. And everybody, of course, hit the ground, and there was hundreds of guys there. But you don't have any value because you don't have any knowledge. You don't have any experience. So if they're going to lose somebody, they're going to lose the new guy. I mean, that's the impression that you get. A Jeep pulled up and said, "Anybody here for the third surge?" Me and this other guy, there was just two of us. We hopped in the back of the Jeep, and they took us about 5 miles to the 29th Evac Hospital, which was a series of Quonset hut buildings. Compared to what the rest of, like the grunts or people that were in the field, we had it pretty nice. It was during the Vietnamization when Nixon was turning over the war to the Vietnamese. And at that point in the Delta, the 9th Division was leaving. And of course, I gathered jobs as they took people and they rotated home. They didn't replace them. So I became an ambulance driver, the entire morgue section, an ER technician, an A&D clerk, patient trust fund clerk, and the radio telephone operator. And finally, by the time I left March 20th, there was only 3 of us. At Canto Airfield, they had a morgue set up where they had 4 trucks that back up, and the aluminum backs fold down into a star, and they're hooked together with a drain. And because usually they have to hose the bodies and make permanent identification. Sometimes I can play them like a video in my head. So, which is why I have an anxiety disorder. So, and that didn't develop until my late 50s.
What was your experience like returning home?
My impression coming back was it was as if nothing was happening in Vietnam. It was like leaving a world and coming into a different world of billboards and people doing their own things, and nobody had any idea there was a war. You pretty much took your uniform off, and for several years you just didn't mention that you had anything to do with it. So then I became a protester, and I was in the last Washington, D.C. demonstration before Nixon resigned. There were 1,200 of us vets on the mall. When you're young, you're idealistic.
Right.
And when you get some years, you get a little bit more rational.
Now keep in mind, on Thursday evening, November the 9th, you're invited to the Bong Heritage Center in Superior for a special screening event. The WDSE production Remembering the Vietnam War Parts 1 and 2 will be shown beginning at 6 p.m. that night. You can go to the WDSE website for more information.
It's time now for the week's business news from the folks at Business North. UPM Blandon will permanently shut down paper machine number 5 in Grand Rapids, eliminating 150 jobs. The decision was blamed on overcapacity in the North American paper market. The shutdown follows previous cuts at Blandon and paper mill closures throughout the region over a span of several decades. The mill will be left with about 300 employees, down from 900 in the year 2000. The company's general manager said the shutdown was no surprise, and he said the good news is that machine number 6 will continue to operate.
Lake Superior Brewing and TwinPortsNightlife.com have launched a partnership to build better awareness about entertainment venues and craft beers. The move came just 1 week after Lake Superior Brewing announced it had changed hands after nearly 23 years in business. Lars Kuno and Lisa Blade purchased the company, which is Minnesota's oldest microbrewery. Lake Superior Brewing will become the primary sponsor of the Twin Ports Nightlife website, which attracts over 30,000 visitors each month.
After disrupting and shutting down an Enbridge pipeline hearing earlier this month, project opponents held a protest against Wells Fargo Bank in downtown Duluth on Tuesday. Protesters said the bank should not finance the $7 billion project. Enbridge executives argued that replacing the aging pipeline is the best way to safely transport petroleum. Opponents contend the money could be spent more wisely by investing in alternative energy that generates less pollution and doesn't contribute to global warming. For more on these and other stories, visit businessnorth.com.
Now, if you have a comment on our show, call today. Call right now. In fact, dial 218-788-2849 to leave a message. You can also send an email to Almanac North at WDSE.org. And don't forget to visit the WDSE website for the very latest schedule information, updates on your favorite local shows, and news here at the station. Well, Julie, doesn't look like too much yard work is going to get done this weekend.
The good news is you probably don't have to use your shovel too much either, because this probably is not going to stay.
I hope some sunshine comes out and melts this away. For Julie and the crew at WDSE, I'm Dennis Anderson. Have a great weekend. Good night, everybody, and be kind.